Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and before we get into today's episode, I want to say that I hope everyone has had a great Christmas, that you were surrounded by those you love, and although I took a couple of days off, I'm back at it to make sure you get your podcast fix as it relates to Exposed. And I thought today I would bring you another story from the Fate of Fortune series. And today we are going to talk about the murders of Tom and Jackie Hawks, who in 2004 were killed while attempting to sell their yacht in Newport Beach, California. And as I like to do, we are going to jump right into it. And I'm going to start off by telling you about Tom Hawks. Now, Tom Hawks was born in 1947, and he was 57 years old at the time of his murder. And Tom was certainly wealthy at the time that he was killed, but he didn't just fall into money. This guy earned it the old-fashioned way, through hard work, right? He was a Vietnam veteran, and after the war, he began his career as a probation officer, and he continued that career until his retirement, which it was always his goal and kind of his dream to retire in his 50s and actually have some time left to enjoy his life and travel and live on the water. He loved that, and through just very hard work and his ability not only to be frugal with his money and save it throughout his life, but also some pretty wise stock market investments, etc. He was able to achieve that, and he was able to retire around the age of 54 years old. Now, at that time, he was the father of two, at this point, grown boys, and he was married to his second wife, Jackie Hawks, who, although she was not the biological mother of his two sons, she was a very integral part of their lives, and she had helped Tom raise them since they were adolescents. So at the time of their murders, she was 47. So she was 10 years younger than Tom. And Tom and Jackie were very well liked in the Newport Beach community in California. They had a small circle of friends, and they were just beloved by that circle, who would describe them as just good, honest, social people who would do anything to help anyone. Now, Tom, even at 57, was in phenomenal shape. Aside from being a probation officer for all those years, he was also an avid bodybuilder, and he was a big, muscular dude. Couple that with the fact that this guy was a Vietnam veteran, and I would imagine he was someone you would not want to mess with or get on the bad side of. Probably a pretty badass dude, right? And he looked like what you would picture a probation officer to look like. Chiseled jaw, muscular guy, just had that look about him. And Jackie Hawkins, whose maiden name was O'Neill, she was no slouch herself. A very, very beautiful lady. She was born in 1957, and this was her second marriage. Now, her first marriage ended, but it was not without tragedy. Jackie had been married to her first husband. His name was Lester, and he worked for a power company. And in late December of 1985, he was tragically killed by a drunk driver when the driver, who was in a pickup truck, hit him head on while he was riding his motorcycle. And Jackie was actually on the back seat of that motorcycle. Miraculously, she survived, but Lester was killed instantly. Now, despite her survival, she did suffer injuries to her left leg and her pelvis, and that would require extensive treatment. And after Lester's funeral, she actually spent about 6 months recovery at her parents' home. She was very hurt in that accident, as you may expect. Now, sadly, the accident also had some other side effects, if you will, and one of those was it prevented Jackie from being able to have biological children. So 4 years after that tragic event, Jackie goes to a chili cook-off in Arizona, and she meets Tom Hawks, and he starts courting her. Eventually, they get married. And as I mentioned, Tom had 2 sons. So Jackie, she really fell in love with those kids. I mean, this was her chance to raise kids, even though she could not have any of her own biologically because of that motorcycle accident. And much like her husband, Tom, she was also very active. They would go to the gym together daily, and she was in phenomenal shape. And those kids of Tom's that she helped rear, they would turn out to be really productive citizens themselves. Ryan Hawks lived in San Diego. He built his success professionally. And Matt Hawks actually became a firefighter in Arizona. So in the early 2000s, after Tom retires, they pursue what was a dream to both of them, but primarily Tom's, most people will say, and that was to live on the water. They purchased a 55-foot yacht for $300,000. It was an older model yacht, but as yachts go, they're always beautiful no matter what the age. And it was already named the perfect name. It was called Well Deserved. So they live on that boat for 3 years, just being out on the water, hosting parties, all the stuff that you would dream to do when you got nothing but time to worry about. And in 2004, they have another change in their life. When Tom's son, Matt, and his wife, they welcome a baby into the world. And Tom and Jackie, they immediately fall in love with their first grandchild. And I don't know about you, but I talk to a lot of people that have grandchildren, and they'll tell me, you think you love your kids, wait till you have grandkids. And it sounds like this was much of the situation. So much so, as a matter of fact, that Tom decides, we're going to sell the yacht so we can be as close as possible to our grandchild and spend as much time as we can with our grandchild in Arizona. So they put their yacht for sale, Well Deserved. And it was not long after they had it listed that they get a potential buyer. And this guy was named Skylar Deleon. So let's talk about Skylar. He was born in Sun Valley, California in 1979, and he was 25 years old when he became an interested buyer of the Hawks yacht. And Skylar grew up in what you would consider to be a troubled household. Very unstable, very dysfunctional. His father was involved in a lot of drug convictions throughout his childhood. Supposedly, there was a lot of abuse that would come Skylar's way from his father. Now, despite all that, Skylar, being from California, he tried his turn at acting. And although he was an uncredited extra in several episodes of the Power Rangers series, when he was in his teens, the whole acting thing just did not work out for Skylar. So after high school, he briefly enlisted in the Marine Corps, but he didn't complete his service. And he received a dishonorable discharge. It would come out later that he actually went AWOL from the Marine Corps, absent without leave. So in 2002, he meets a girl online, and her name was Jennifer Henderson. And they would marry in the same year, 2002. Now, according to Jennifer, she had grown up in a very strict household where not a lot of emotion was shown, and she would describe this upbringing as making her very codependent, and she would be one of these girls that would seek guys that were kind of broken and try to fix them. And it was some codependency thing for her. But she graduates high school and she becomes a hairstylist, which was her profession when she and Skylar get married. Now, she would say one of the things that attracted her to Skylar, he was much like her, very needy, which she would say she was drawn to. And shortly after getting married, they would welcome their first child into the world. And shortly after that, she gets pregnant with her second child. But these two young kids were struggling. Skylar couldn't keep a job, and Jennifer didn't make a ton of money as a hairstylist. Certainly not enough to support two young kids. And they were actually living in the garage of her mother and father's house. They just took that garage and kind of turned it into a room of sorts. And you've got Skylar, Jennifer, and their two young kids, one of them only being 2 months old, all living in this one room. So you may wonder, okay, you got two kids here, you don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out, and you're looking at purchasing a yacht where the asking price was $425,000. What the fuck? Well, this was all a plan, and that is what we're going to get into. So in early November of 2004, Skylar Deleon, he sets up a meeting at the Yacht, which was docked in Newport Beach on the premise that he was a buyer. And Tom and his wife, they meet him there and they give him a tour of the yacht. Now, Skylar had brought someone with him, an ex-con friend by the name of Alonzo Mason, who he had met in a work release program a year prior. And Tom, if you'll remember, he was a longtime probation officer. He senses something ain't stirring the Kool-Aid here with this Alonzo guy. And he knows ex-cons when he sees them. And although Skylar was about as good a con artist as you will ever run into, Alonzo, not so much. And he kind of stood out as not very sophisticated, if you will, not someone that would be looking at a yacht. Tom also starts to think the same thing we would all think. No way that this 25-year-old kid, meaning Skylar, can afford a freaking yacht. Skylar picks this up. He figures out Tom's getting very apprehensive, and he does something pretty devious. During their discussions, Tom's wife, Jackie, mentions the reason they're getting rid of the yacht, there's nothing wrong with it. We have a new grandchild coming, and we're so excited about this, and that's why we're selling the yacht, etc. So Skylar calls his wife, who was a part of this entire plan. It would come out later on. And he tells her, hey, I need you to bring the 2-month-old child up here to the yacht. So hopefully that'll put the couple at ease. If the couple sees us with this baby, they're going to assume we're good people, right? So she does that. His wife brings their own 2-month-old child onto this yacht, and Tom and Jackie, upon seeing this baby, they just assume this must be on the up and up, because who would do that, right? So at this point, Tom and Jackie, they along with Skylar, they set up a meeting for November 15th of 2004 to basically do a test drive of this yacht with Skylar. And it's essentially the same thing you would do if you were buying a car, right? When you buy a car, you go look at it. If it's a used car, you take it, you drive it, you make sure it's running correctly. If there's some special features on it, the person selling it to you will go over those features with you. No different here. It's just a yacht instead of a car. Now, in the meantime, before they meet up, Skylar hatches the rest of his plan. And part of that plan is on the day that they go to take this yacht out for a test drive, he brings along with him Alonzo, which was the guy that was with him at the initial meeting that he met in the work release program, as well as another individual who is a former Crips gang member by the name of, and you're not going to believe this name when I tell you, but no shit, this dude's legal name is John Fitzgerald Kennedy, but he ain't looking like John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He looks like a Crips gang member. Now, he had met JFK through another ex-con, and he asked this guy to be part of his plan. So the day comes, and they go to do this test drive. And let me describe John Kennedy for you. He's exactly what you would picture as a Crips gang member. He just looked the role. And again, Tom, no stranger to criminals, he was a probation officer. He asked, as soon as they get onto the yacht, who is that guy? And the response Skylar gives him is that John Kennedy is his accountant. I'm going to put some pictures on the Patreon, but there's no way you would mistake this guy for an accountant. Even though, believe it or not, he had a suit on when they went on this test drive, meaning John Kennedy. So they take the yacht out, and it's John Kennedy, Skylar, Alonzo on one side, and Tom and Jackie Hawks on the other. And they get pretty far out to sea, and they anchor the boat to go over some of the features, etc., answer any questions that these guys have, all of that stuff. And it's at this point that John Kennedy, that Crips gang member, he says he's getting seasick. Now, he's faking that, but that's what he tells everybody, and he goes below deck. And some time passes. And Skylar says, you know what? I'm going to go check on him. And he goes below deck. And more time passes, an exorbitant amount of time, and they haven't come back. And Tom Hawk says, I'm going to go check on those two. And he goes below deck. So above deck, that leaves just Jackie Hawks and Alonzo topside. And just a few moments later, struggling can be heard from below deck. And it's obvious to Jackie that her husband is getting attacked. She freaks out and she goes to run below deck to see what's going on. And Alonzo pulls out a taser and he tases Jackie, immediately knocking her to the ground. He then handcuffs her hands behind her back. Now, below deck, her husband, Tom, is absolutely fighting for his life. He's got this gang member behind him, choking him, and Skylar is in front of him, and he's just pounding away on him, beating him. And eventually, it took both of them, but they subdue Tom Hawk, and he and Jackie, at this point, are both handcuffed, hands behind their back, and duct tape is applied over both their mouths and their eyes. And everything calms down for a second. And then Skylar produces a bunch of documents. And these documents consist of a bill of sale for the yacht, as well as powers of attorney for all these bank accounts that belong to the Hawk family. And as Skylar goes through the paperwork, he is having Jackie give him all the account information for these various accounts. Then he makes both of them sign all of these documents. Now, I'm sure this was under the pretense of, we're going to let you go, right? So after all of that is done, the group of three then brings Tom and Jackie above deck, handcuffed, and the duct tape across both of their eyes and mouth. And they take the boat's various ropes and they actually tie this couple together. So they're sitting there. They can't see or say anything, but Tom hears something. When he hears it, he knows exactly what it is. He hears one of the heavy boat anchors being dragged across the deck, slowly but surely. And it's at that point that he realizes, oh, they're not going to let us go. He knows exactly what's about to happen. So he waits. And when he hears the person dragging this anchor get close enough to him, he summons up all of his strength. He kicks at what later on would be discovered to be Skylar. And he kicks Skylar so hard that Skylar actually flies through the air. But what can you do from there? You can't see. You can hardly breathe. And you're handcuffed. John Kennedy, the gang member, he sees this. He sees Skylar get the shit kicked out of him. And he swings at the totally blind with duct tape Tom Hawks, and he knocks him out cold with one shot. And at this point, the next thing the couple, who, remember, they are tied together, the next thing that they hear is the splash of the water as the anchor is tossed overboard. And it's at that point they feel a tug and realize as they are dragged across the decking of the boat that they were tied to that anchor. They're thrown over the side by the anchor and they sink some 3,500 feet to the bottom of the ocean while still alive. Just a horrible way to die.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. Fast forward 11 days, and Tom's brother, Jim Hawks, he calls police because he hadn't heard from his brother. And upon contacting both of Tom's kids, he discovers they have not heard from Tom either. And this was not common at all. He would call his kids very frequently. But before he called police, he went out to the yacht, which was parked back at the dock where it was always parked at this point. And he notices the dinghy was out of place on that boat, which apparently Tom was so meticulous about this yacht, he would have never had that dinghy out of place. And there were other things that were just small things displaced in the boat that really raised red flags for him. So he contacted the police and he said, "Hey man, my brother is missing. We don't know where he's at. We don't know where his wife's at." And he kind of told them about the stuff being out of place. So police talked to Tom's sons and they said they have a name of someone that Tom was supposed to meet to talk about selling the yacht. And that was the last time that they talked to their dad, and that they knew the guy's name was Skylar Deleon. Tom had told him that. So police, they call Skylar and they call him in to question him, and he's fine with that. He goes into the police station and this kid is cool, calm, and collected. And he tells police, "Yeah, I met with the Hawks and I did buy their yacht." And as a matter of fact, he pulls out paperwork and shows it to them. And the police look at this and the signatures are there. Everything looked legit. So the police had a couple of questions for Skylar. And the first was, how the hell did you afford this? And if you indeed bought the yacht, where's the canceled check or the credit card receipt or whatever? And we need some kind of proof that you actually bought it. And he said, "Well, I paid cash for it." And the police look at him and they say, "You paid cash for it? Well, where the hell did you get $425,000 cash?" And Skylar looks him right in the face and says, "Well, I'm a drug dealer. I bought it cash, so I don't have canceled checks. And it was all like drug profits." Now, the police are taken aback by that, but they continue to talk to him and they ask him if he had any information as to where these folks could be. Where did the Hawks say they were going after they sold the yacht? And he said, "Oh yeah, they said they were going for a short vacation to Mexico after we processed the transaction. So I would assume that's where they were at." And y'all, this kid is so crazy, just so psychotic, that he was able to initially fool these officers into believing his story. There was just nothing to indicate he was lying. That's how psychotic this kid is. He was just too calm to be lying. So they didn't have anything to hold him with, and he seemed like he was telling the truth, so they let him go on his way. And they continue investigating. But it wouldn't be much longer. As a matter of fact, just a few days later, they would discover that two people walked into a bank in Mexico, and they tried to access funds from that bank. And the bank that they walked into was a bank that the Hawks had. And these two people, they were showing a power of attorney saying they have the right to that bank account. So when they reviewed the surveillance video, they noticed that those two people were none other than Skylar and his wife, Jennifer. Then, a short time after that, just mere days, the Hawks' 1998 silver Honda CR-V was located in San Miguel, Mexico. Now, witnesses that saw the vehicle being dropped off were able to identify Skylar Deleon as the driver of the vehicle and his wife as the person who was following him. So at this point, as a matter of fact, December 16th of 2004, the police arrest Skylar Deleon, but they couldn't arrest him for murder yet. They just felt like they didn't have enough to arrest him for that. They wanted to bring him in and question him and try to get him to admit to it. But they did have enough to arrest him for money laundering charges related to the cash that he said he paid for the boat off of drug dealing profits. So he comes in after this arrest and he ain't talking. He ain't admitting to anything. And they also bring his wife, Jennifer, in, and they tell her, look, here's the deal. You tell us exactly what happened. Because they knew at this point, this is the guy who killed the Hawks. Even though they didn't have bodies, they pretty much knew these people had to be dead. So they bring her in. They say, you tell us what you know. You tell us what happened. You tell us where these bodies are, and we'll do what's known as a proffer agreement with you, and you will do no jail time. You won't spend a day in jail. We won't even prosecute you for this in exchange for you telling us this information and testifying against your husband. And let me tell you how dumb this girl was. She said, fuck that. I'm not testifying against my husband. You can charge me with whatever. So they're like, okay. So they charge her with first-degree murder, and her husband also gets charged with first-degree murder. Incidentally, these are death penalties when it's first-degree murder, right? You can get the death penalty for that. Now, in the meantime, they gained some information that Alonzo Mason was also involved, but he hauls ass to Mexico. He ain't in the United States anymore. However, and I can only say it's because somewhere in Alonzo's brain, he has a conscience. He returns to the United States. This is about 3 months after fleeing to Mexico. And he goes to the police and he lays out the whole story. In exchange for that, they offer him a plea agreement where basically they say you're going to get 20 years in prison if you tell us everything and you lay it all out and you tell us the truth. And that's what he does. And in that story, he also includes that gang member, which nobody knew about at this point, John Kennedy. So obviously, in the meantime, they're still investigating all of this, and they do find some evidence inside of Skylar Deleon's room that he had with Jennifer at her parents' house. As a matter of fact, they discover several pieces of evidence linking him to the crime, including the Hawks' laptop, their video camera, and personal papers that he would have no business having. They also find a cell phone, and on that cell phone, they find some pretty interesting information outside of several calls that he made to the Hawks. They also find some information related to another murder of a guy by the name of John Jarvie. John Jarvie is a guy who met Skylar Deleon in jail. Now, he was 45 years old when he was found murdered, just 2 years prior to the murder of the Hawks. And he gets charged with that murder while he was in custody for the murders of both Tom and Jackie Hawk. Now, as far as trials go, first up was Jennifer Deleon. And as I said, due to her refusal to detail the crimes to police regarding her husband and completely refusing to testify against her husband, they throw the book at her. And she actually gets found guilty, and she gets sentenced to 2 life sentences without parole for her involvement in the death of the Hawks' being found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. And she could have gotten off scot-free just testifying against her husband. Next up was Alonzo Mason, the one who basically gave all the details in this case to police, and they honored their agreement with him. He ended up with 20 years in prison. He actually served 17 years of that sentence, and according to my research, he is now out of prison. Now, next up, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, that gang member. He's also charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, and he is sentenced in 2009 to death. Now, as far as Skylar Deleon, remember I told you he had charges for a prior murder as well as the 2 charges of first-degree murder as it relates to the Hawks. Now, both of those cases, they go ahead and they try those at the same time. So before I give you the results of all that, I want to break down the murder charge and crime against John Jarvie. As I said, Jarvie, a 45-year-old, he was from Anaheim, California, and he had met Skylar earlier that year while both were working in a furlough program at a private jail in California. Now, Deleon was unemployed at that time. He was in debt. He was supporting his wife, who was pregnant at this point, and he lures Jarvie into a scheme involving a supposed real estate deal. And basically the scheme was, hey, why don't you go in halves with me on this house in Mexico? We can get it cheap and sell it for a ton of money. And he, being the con artist he is, he convinces Jarvie this is legit. And so on December 26th of 2003, Jarvie cashes 2 $25,000 checks at his bank in Laguna Beach. He contacts Deleon shortly thereafter, according to cell records, and within hours, Deleon uses $18,000 in brand new $100 bills to make a purchase at a boatyard, and then he deposits $21,000 into a joint account with his wife, Jennifer. The next day, December 27th, Deleon and his cousin drive to Mexico with Jarvie, and according to trial testimony from his cousin, who was the key prosecution witness, Deleon blindfolded Jarvie with a cloth over his head, led him from the SUV down a remote, dusty hillside lined with trees and bushes, and slashes his fucking throat. Jarvie's body is then discovered by missionaries later that day, and about 2 hours later, Deleon crosses back into the U.S. and disposes of Jarvie's car. So the motive in that case was financial gain, and Deleon had convinced Jarvie to bring $50,000 in cash and slice his throat as soon as he got his hands on it. So that came out in the trial. And what happens to Skylar? Well, in 2008, a jury convicts Skylar Deleon of first-degree murder in Jarvie's case, along with the 2004 murders of Thomas and Jackie Hawks, and he receives the death penalty. However, in California, at this time, and really up to today, the death penalty is suspended. It has been for a long, long time. So Skylar, as of today, is still alive, but he ain't just sitting in jail and biding his time. You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. So Skylar is no longer Skylar. What do I mean by that? Well, he has transitioned into a female. He is now known as Skylar Precocia Deleon. And while on death row, he legally changed his name, and he was allowed to take hormone therapy, and he is allowed to wear women's clothing. And in 2015, he actually applies for gender transition surgery. And many years later, he actually received, according to my research, gender transition surgery, all funded by taxpayers while on death row as a part of a policy instituted when Kamala Harris was Attorney General of California. And that is not a political statement. That is just a fact. He is now a fully transitioned inmate, and he's actually applied to be transferred to a woman's prison. And of all the cases I've covered, he is the only one I've ever heard of. He may be the only one in history at death row that I'm aware of to ever fully transition, all funded by taxpayers. And folks, you can't make that shit up. But I want to go over quickly. I found a timeline because this transition thing is just shocking to me. When you're sentenced to death and people are paying for you to transition. So as it relates to this taxpayer funding and freaking death row inmates, I got to give you more on this. I found the timeline, which according to the timeline, this is what occurred. So Skylar Deleon reportedly was not born Skylar Deleon. He was born John Jacobson Jr., but supposedly DeLeon identified as a female from a young age, but he faced abuse from his father for expressing this. His father reportedly would catch him dressing in girls' clothes, etc. So in 2002, he legally changed his name from John Jacobson Jr. to Skylar Deleon, and that was as an initial step in transitioning. And then in 2004, supposedly the motive for the murders of Thomas and Jackie Hawks and John Jarvie from earlier was partially to obtain funds for an entire gender reassignment surgery. And DeLeon had actually scheduled the procedure for November of 2004 with a $500 deposit, but he needed $15,000 more. And supposedly that was the whole point of him killing these poor people. Now, while in jail post-arrest, according to reports, DeLeon actually attempted self-castration. He tried to cut his dick off with a razor, according to reports. In 2009, after sentencing to death row in San Quentin, DeLeon began hormone therapy, and that included testosterone blockers immediately upon arrival. That led to physical changes like reduced body hair and breast development. And in February, in an ABC News interview, he expressed a strong desire for surgery, stating 100% that he wanted the surgery. And he, at this time, also obtained a legal name change to Skylar Sophia DeLeon, which was later updated to Skylar Precocia DeLeon. So 2011 to 2017, during Kamala Harris's tenure as California Attorney General, the state shifted policies on transgender inmate care. California already provided hormone therapy pre-2010 to inmates, but lawsuits pushed for full surgery access. Can y'all believe this shit? And then in 2015, California became the first state to formally adopt a new policy allowing taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgeries for inmates deemed medically necessary following some lawsuit settlements and court rulings. DeLeon, by this point, had met prerequisites like gender dysphoria diagnosis. He also had ongoing hormone therapy and psychological counseling, and he began petitioning for surgery after hearing about a federal ruling from another inmate. As of mid-2015, DeLeon was wearing women's clothing in prison and appeared more feminine, but still had not yet received surgery approval. Now, in 2020, reports confirmed DeLeon was legally recognized as a woman continuing hormone therapy and had petitioned for surgery, though it remained pending. On April 5th of 2023, guess what? DeLeon underwent gender-affirming surgery, which in parentheses, it says genital reconstruction and breast augmentation, funded by California taxpayers under the 2015 policy. And it says this occurred while serving a life sentence without parole after California's death penalty moratorium. And as of late 2024, DeLeon confirmed the surgery in a letter and is awaiting transfer from San Quentin to a women's prison facility such as the Central California Women's Facility. And no further updates have been made as of this recording in late December of 2025. Look, I don't give a fuck where you stand on transgender surgeries and things of that nature. It has nothing to do Political has nothing to do with what I'm about to say. If you kill 3 people, minimum of 3, that's what we know of, you don't get to have anything you want, in my opinion, including breast augments. This dude got fake boobs. Fake boobs paid for by hardworking men and women of the state of California. Blows my fucking mind. And it pisses me off, quite frankly. What is wrong with people? That's all we got for today. Thank you for listening to Exposed. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/exposed podcast files. I got a ton of files to upload on this case, a lot of pictures. I've even got before and after pictures of Deleon, as well as many other files on this case. But you can get commercial-free early releases, bonus episodes, quarterly gifts for our top-tier Patreon celebrity members, and so much more. Again, patreon.com/exposed podcast files. I love and appreciate all these people for supporting what we do here on Exposed. I couldn't do it without them. Thank you so much. And until next time for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.